Welcome, everyone. I'm Aron Snyder with the Born Primitive Outdoor Podcast. Today, I've got somebody I actually just met online. But since I've gotten into fly fishing recently, he's been giving me some advice on what rods and things to get. And that's Jeff. It's McGowan, Jeffrey McGowan.
Yeah, that's correct, man. Jeff McGowan.
I nailed it out of the gate. Good. So yeah, as people follow along with me on social, I've fly fished before when I was younger, mostly dry fly fishing. Certainly not an expert, but when I start to get into something, I kind of engulf myself in it. And so, reaching out, I've had a ton of help from, friends and everything else, but also, you kind of getting me set up so I knew what to get with fly rods, things like that. But tell everyone kind of what you do, your background, how you ended up doing what you're doing now, and just kind of lay everybody out on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. It is pretty cool that, we only started a couple weeks ago having this conversation, but we've damn near talked every day since, which has been pretty sweet. But I'm kind of like you, man. I'm a nerd on gear and always have been. And I'm from Montana. I went to college in Montana. And during that time, I was working at a local ski and board shop, and then became the manager of that shop and buying. And then during that time, I met the reps, and I just thought it was cool. They were selling cool products and traveling and, hanging out at cool places. And I just liked that. I kind of saw that as something I'd want for my future. So that's actually what I did. I was able, through that same guy, actually able to get into the rep world, but in action sports. So ski, skate, snow, surf, all that. And I did that for about, I want to say like 8 years. And then I was kind of coming into my later 20s and I was slowing down, I wanted to kind of start to create more roots in my life. And there were always two things in my life. It was skiing and fly fishing. So, and it's perfect being in Montana. I got skiing during the winter, and then I've got fly fishing all, spring, summer, fall. And so I just kind of saw fly fishing as being something that probably had more longevity for me in the long run, just, kind of for my personality, what I wanted to achieve and et cetera. And so I just started blindly reaching out to people in the industry, and I was fortunate enough to get brought on by a company called RL Winston, which is a phenomenal rod company based out of Twin Bridges, Montana. And I joined them and became sales manager. And that really helped me kind of get my, legs stretched in the fly fishing industry. And then from there, went on to be national sales manager for Scientific Anglers, which is based out of Midland, Michigan. And during that time, working in-house, I really just kind of missed the road life, missed that lifestyle, selling directly to consumers, and as well as the shops and wholesale dealers, that I had the opportunity to actually join the rep team here in the Northern Rockies. And so now I am currently a sales representative for Orvis, Scientific Anglers, and Galvin, representing those three brands in the Northern Rockies, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. And then I have business partners in Bozeman who kind of manage your territory, Wyoming and Eastern Montana. And I manage Western Montana and Idaho.
So, and how long has that been then for that specific job or that, position that you're in now?
This position, it's only been about 3 years.
So
I was living in Michigan. Really what drove me is I wanted to be back in Montana. I was living in Michigan, but I missed, even when I lived in like Washington, when I was a rep in action sports, I kept my Montana driver's license and just claimed like the room that I was renting as my quote unquote office in Seattle, just so I could retain my Montana driver's license, honestly, so I could get my tags here.
Yeah. Well, it's for those who don't know, from my experience, like a fishing rep, but a fishing rep and an archery rep are basically the same thing. When you're a rep, you're a representative for multiple different companies. You go to the different pro shops, whether that's archery or, the fishing shops, show them the gear, things like that. So I'm not a rep. Dive into your day-to-day life as far as a rep goes. Like you said, the road life, you got to go to shows, you got to see all the shops, but kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about it is that it's not a consistent thing. It's a very seasonal thing. So with fly fishing, it's pretty much a one season brand, just as archery is. Like Matthews only launches one series of bows a year. So that's a one season brand. And that's pretty much what fly fishing is, with spring being our main launch date. So it's like kind of right now that you see like all the new products and they're coming out. But it was back in, July, August, September that I was traveling around showing those products. So I also work with Orvis, which does apparel. And so they're a 2-season brand. So like right now, I'm helping everybody, making sure shipments come in on time, making sure everybody's getting, going to be loaded for when the rush happens. With archery, your target is September, right? For us, it's like probably June and July. That's, when you get the majority of the fly fishing taking place, people traveling, getting guides, all that kind of thing. And then you got your fringe seasons outside of that. But so it changes all the time, man. It's anything from just really being at the desk and kind of being customer service, which is a lot of what I've been doing right now. So it's just sitting behind a desk. If an order goes wrong or something doesn't get shipped right, you're kind of playing the middleman with the wholesale dealer and the manufacturer. To, doing shows. This is kind of a popular show season for us as well, kind of amping up that vibe, getting people excited. Dealers have the opportunity to sell old products. So it's kind of a good time. Right now, we're just kind of building momentum. But in, a week or two, I'll be hitting the road showing fall 25. So product that will ship in the fall. And so I'll do my loop around Western Montana and Idaho and meet with the wholesale dealers, show them product, and have the conversation and just plan the business for 6 to 9 months from now.
So with me getting kind of into the fly fishing, I say getting into it, whatever. I've always fished, right? But diving into it in the sense of, I did a podcast recently on my own talking about kind of the parallels of when somebody gets into bow hunting or looks at going Western hunting. Generally there's YouTube and there's podcasts they'll hop on and listen, not hop on, but listen to. And one thing I have found a very commonality is a lot of people that are in the fly fishing world, Montana, ski. Any podcast I've listened to, they've actually mentioned that. But, with a lot of parallels, a lot of commonalities. And I say that in every way, from shit talkers all the way to, like I'm learning more about nymphing right now, where I'm more of a dry fly fisherman. And then you also learn, like you got the haters, like I said, and then you're kind of like, I'm just searching for knowledge of different things that I haven't done. And that's kind of how, you and I run into each other or whatever. I was asking about rods. Orvis obviously is pretty, has a very strong foothold in the fly fishing world. With the rods, like, I'm not trying to say this because I'm getting questions about this now. Like I know what I'm doing. To get when someone gets into fly fishing, the difference in rods you guys offer, because I've had Clearwaters before, which is a great rod. You guys have like a Clearwater, I think you actually have even one that's even more of like, I say beginner, but more affordable.
The Encounter.
Yeah, I've had the Clearwaters before. They fish great. Today I used the Helios 9-foot 6-weight F, and I've got a 9-foot 6-inch 5-weight Helios D coming. It was a fairly substantial difference for me, and I listened to a ton of different podcasts where people poo-poo on things, and it's getting the same parallel, like, are people paid by these companies or whatever else? But I did notice a fairly significant difference with that Helios than I have other rods. But what are your thoughts on that, before we dive into more geeky stuff? Like the parallel, do you bow hunt too? Do you hunt at all?
I do. Yeah. No, I've grown up. I'd say that's probably third in line.
Yeah.
I definitely grew up more on the rifle side of things, where fly fishing was kind of my thing. Elk hunting was my dad's thing. And I didn't realize how fortunate I was at the time, but I grew up packing in on horses, man. I'll be honest with you. It wasn't until about 6 years ago that I when my dad got rid of the animals, that I learned how to pack stuff out on my back. But no, elk's always a big part. But I truly believe that actually archery, elk hunting, and fly fishing are two of the most like similar hobby sports, whatever you want to call them. Like it's because of the mindset, man. It's like archery hunting is to hunting, but like fly fishing is to fly fishing. You know, so it's like the majority of the people are rifle hunting, and it's you set up a rifle, you can shoot at longer distance. There's just a lot easier success rate, where when you choose to do archery, like you're electing to do it in a little bit more of an artisan way and a little bit more of like a holistic way, tying yourself in a little bit more to the environment, and you're choosing to do that and you're getting something out of it. Well, it's the exact same with fly fishing. Like fly fishing is the fishing, what archery is, where it's the more artistic way. It's, you can catch more fish by going out with a Rapala, casting a line across the river and reeling it straight back to you, but that's just, I don't get gratitude out of that. I like that you have to be in tune with the environment. You have to be able to understand what bugs are on the water, what's happening, where the fish eating or how they're eating, because the fish are eating and they're looking for an opportunity to eat. You just need to have enough knowledge to understand what bug it is, where they are in the water column, where they are in the river. And if just like, they say that, I think, what's the rule that they say with archery, where it's like 10% of the hunters get like 90% of the fish.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of the same thing with fly fishing. Like I can go to a river and probably figure it out, just as you can go to the mountains and probably figure it out.
I talked a lot about that on my podcast of how funny it is. 'Cause like, I'm kind of in the world now where, I'm listening to people, like people listen to me with bow hunting, and what you say, like I always say, like with elk, they have to eat, sleep, drink, and fornicate, right? Luckily they fornicate during bow season, and you find where they're doing 3 or 4 of those, or 2 or 3 of those, you're going to be in good shape, right? You're probably going to kill them.
Exactly.
And so today, for like example, Chris, the dude, I mean, I was ahead of him in the beginning. That we were having a competition, and he threw a couple specific sow bugs on and beat the brakes off of me on the second half of the day. We the same thing though, the depth, right? Like the depth is huge, reading the water, and then what bug, and it's amazing how much one bug that you can change from 2 different sow bugs. They're both sow bugs, right? But whether that be the color, or if you're running tungsten, it's a little bit deeper, whatever, like again, that depth makes a huge difference. And I think that when I was paralleling things, it's almost everything. And when like you said, reading the water, whatever else. And then as far as people looking for knowledge, when you dive online, you're going to see all the same kind of stuff, meaning a ton of informational stuff. You've always got the cynic, dude. I would say, what's that dude's name? Kelly Galpin. He's a Montana dude.
Kelly Gallup. Yeah.
Gallup.
Legend.
Gallup. Yeah. He's obviously got a bit of a sense of humor, bit of a cynic, a legend in the community. It seems like, right? And his, I've watched a bunch of his stuff, and I started listening to podcasts, and it's kind of funny. Certain podcasts I just don't want to listen to, because I'm looking for knowledge, not stories. Not to say one's wrong, right? Some people just want to hear hunting stories. Other people want to hear the knowledge and rather than the hunting story, like more technical stuff. For me, I'm in that technical side, but with the in that world, like with what you're doing now, when you go to a shop, like just out of curiosity, and I'm kind of bouncing around all over here, but ratio wise, like you look at 3-weight, 4-weight, 5-weight, 6-weight, like you said, the Encounter, the Clearwater, like what are your biggest sellers? Is the more budget friendly rods your biggest sellers? Is that Helios? Is that the biggest seller? Like what are shops looking for? Or is it really kind of dependent on regionality, I guess?
Oh man, there's so many variables in it. And, it really just depends. I mean, first of all, like the 9 foot, so the length of the rod, 9 foot length, 5 weight, and what, like, that is your bread and butter rod. That is what makes this industry tick, is because that's your go-to trout rod. It's And when we're talking about a 5 weight, and this is somewhere like we don't need to dive into it now, but if you want to get nerdy, this is a place I'd love to go in the conversation, because I think it's like one of the misunderstood areas in the industry is like, what does a 5 weight actually mean? And what that actually relates to is the mass of the fly line. Like a fly line, again, like to try to kind of make that correlation, like a fly line is exactly what an arrow is to a bow. Like, so I have one bow, but I have different arrow setups for different stuff, right? So it's the same thing with the fly rod. Like I could have a 9-foot 5-weight fly rod, but I can give that rod different personality and like get different performance out of it by the different fly line I put on. Just like if I were to put on a 350, grain arrow or a 550 grain arrow, you're going to get different things out of it. And so you can actually really kind of cater that to what you want. But at the same time, rods are always, the easy golf analogy. It's like, you don't play golf with a 7-iron, right? You have a bag of clubs, just as you're going to end up having multiple rods. But in general, the 9-foot 5-weight is like what makes the world tick. And most people, that's what they're going to get for their first rod. And the reason for that is that it's delicate enough that it can present like a light dry fly, but it's also got enough backbone to it that it can throw out a streamer. And so it's kind of just that bridge rod that does a lot. But I think like in time, when you do acquire a lot of rods and, an adequate skill set in casting, I actually kind of think that like, it's honestly one of the rods I probably use the least, because I fish a lot out of a drift boat. So I'm taking 2 or 3 or 4 rods with me every time I go to the river. And so I'm going to have a 4-weight set up for my dry fly. I'm going to have a 6-weight set up for my streamer. I'm going to have the, which you're soon to find out about, this 9-foot 5-inch 5-weight, which I just think is like one of the best rods ever made. And that will be kind of more like my nymphing rod. So then I have all bases covered. So if I'm floating down the river and we're not seeing anything rise or eat anything, maybe I'm throwing the streamer or the nymph rod, but maybe we see a pot of fish and like a little back eddy or something, then we're anchoring up and I already got the 4-weight ready to go and I'm casting a light dry fly line. So definitely the 9-foot 5-weight. But then as far as series of rod goes, it really just depends, man. I mean, I think a lot of times you're going to see anything price point like outsell in volume. So like you'll sell more units in that, but you're talking about a, $150 just a rod versus an $1,100 to get the Helios. So, you only have to sell, you have to sell 10 of the encounters to, equate, or, 9 of the encounters to equate to 1 Helios. So the Helios probably is number 1 in dollars, but we're selling more units at the price point, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. No, I get that totally.
And then it's market, like your Cabela's, your sporting goods stores, they're going to kind of cater to more of that beginner, intermediate angler. Whereas like once you get advanced enough, you should be seeking out your local fly shop, because they're going to have the knowledge to the water. Like one thing I always say with fly fishing is like, there's nowhere you can, like the internet's an amazing resource, right? But like there's nowhere you can go on the internet to like find out what's happening on your river that day. I mean, there are times where like I've had literally the best day of fishing in my life with my buddy. We were fishing streamers. I actually took a day off of archery hunting. I hiked out the mountains to fish with him because he's just a great homie. And we fished and we had like one of the best days I've ever had fishing in my life. The next day we're like, I literally took the day off work. He delayed his travel back to Utah. And we're like, dude, we're going to do this again. This was way too good. We got the next day, exact same temperature, exact same water flow, exact same water temp, everything. Couldn't catch a fish for the life of us.
Yeah, that happens in elk hunting as well.
Dude, like, how do you explain that,
Yeah, no, that definitely happens in elk hunting as well. So with with on the fly fishing side of things, or like you said, talked about geeking out. You definitely can get confused, and again, all the parallels are so crazy because you talk about arrow weights and front of center, and I mean, people get really wrapped up in that, and I totally. On my end, there's definitely more of a reason to have multiple rods. There is to have multiple bows. I would stand on that.
I definitely agree.
Mountain for a while. Now that doesn't mean you wouldn't have, a couple bows where you have maybe a lower poundage one or a tournament bow or a backup bow. But like today, I could justifiably say I would want two 9-foot 5 weights or like a 9-foot 5-inch 5 weight and a 9-foot 5 weight, both basically so I don't have to retie everything with just different bugs. You know, that would be one, maybe run a little bit heavier, you know, weight on it, meaning split shot or whatever, and then a streamer rod. You know, so 3 rods I could have had today and certainly would have used every one. Not that it's that big of a deal to change up, you know, bugs, or, you know, in my case, I'm newer, so I have a horrible hook set that turns into a jumbled up ball of shit, and I don't want to retie, and the fishing's hot, and Chris is kicking the crap out of me, so I just grab my other rod and I'm ready to roll. You know, and then like there's the Euro nymphing. I mean, there's a lot to it, and then I have a little bit heavier weight rod for streamers, right? Which you don't have to have. I think I'm probably a little bit over rodded right now, but when you get into that, the one thing like the nymphing side of things, like I said, I had dry fly fish before, mostly in alpine lakes where fish are really dumb. And my dentist, he's one of my best friends, Dan, he was trying to get me to go last year. So this year he got me to go, and he's like, all right, man, we're going to take a 9-foot whatever leader. We're going to cut it down. Then we're going to add like whatever 3 or 4X tippet, and you put your split shot here. Then we're going to tie a sow bug on here. And then there's going to be about 8 to 12 inches, and you're going to tie a midge on here or a Dan bug that he ties, and you throw your indicator. I'm like, I'm yarding out 11 foot of shit. This is wild, right? Yeah. I'm like, and then I'm thinking, holy cow, I've got 11 foot to play with before I even see the indicator move, because I haven't done a lot of nymphing, right? And so I did catch a decent amount of fish that first day. You're not going to walk into fishing and figure that out, right? Like you're going to have someone help you, or social media or YouTube, right? To figure that out. But you also at that point too have to know how to cast. Thank God I can do that. Not tying, very important. You need to know how to tie everything on. After that, it's reading the river and just, you know, not being afraid. One, I'm learning to set the hook a lot. And then 2, it's amazing how much a small difference in split shot or depth, or changing your indicator, maybe not so much, but changing your indicator a little bit to get into that strike zone where those fish are. A small amount of difference can, like Chris changed the bugs and a little bit of depth today, and by the time I went and pissed and came back, he had landed 3 20 to 23 inch rainbows before I was done pissing from that small change. I mean, it's pretty wild to me, and I'm talking too much because you're my guest, but I'm excited about fly fishing. But dive in anywhere you want there.
Oh, dude, no, like, I think that's part of the reason why, like, you and I probably hit it off as much as we did early on. It's just because I think we both, like, we like to get into the minutia of it. It's not only do we like the activity and, like, you know, the feeling of catching a fish or shooting elk and the success, but, dude, I just as much like the back end, like being in my garage, you know, in the evening with lights turned on, tinkering on my gear, figuring stuff out. And I mean, from what you just said though, man, there's honestly so much to dissect. I actually just wrote down just like briefly a couple things, but like one, like I think starting with casting, like, you know, all of us want to go out and catch fish. All of us want success in like whatever endeavor it is that we have, right? But like the number one thing you do is practice your fly rod off the river. You know, it's just like nobody should go archery elk cutting having just bought a bow, you know, walk out of the store and then go to the mountains to shoot. I mean, you should have, you know, the more time you put in your backyard directly equates to your, you know, like your chances of success in, you know, when you're actually out on the river or actually out in the field. And one of the best lessons I ever learned in fly fishing was from this guy named Brian Sylvie, who's he's a pro. He still fishes with Winston. I actually brought him on to SA when I was at SA. But this guy is just an absolute legend in the industry. And he's one of those guys that didn't have YouTube, you know, didn't have anybody to call to ask questions. He's one of those guys that just like knows what he knows because he went out there and figured it out. And because of that, like, and I still think that's always going to be your best thing. Like, YouTube is amazing. Like, your local fly shop is amazing, but nothing beats personal experience. But one of the best lessons he ever taught me was efficiency. Like, if you go out there and you just start like hucking lines and just, you know, like if you put 1 or 2 bad casts on a fish, the chances are that fish is gone. Like, I mean, there's very few places anywhere anymore where like you're going to get pristine opportunities on fish that aren't being targeted all the time. You know, there are no more secrets. just as there's rarely a trailhead you could drive to anymore on opening day of archery season and not find another, Toyota Tacoma, right?
Yeah,
That's it's efficient. Yeah, man. So efficiency, being able to walk out to the river and not just start casting, but like get to the river, look at it. First of all, do you see any rising fish? If not, like, what is the highest probability area that they are? Like, then just work your way. You don't have to go splashing across the river. Work your way there. Get yourself in position to make the right cast, and then be in position but be good enough of a caster to make that cast the first cast. And that little difference, I think, makes such a dramatic difference in the overall success rate. I mean, you can sit there and then, nip up a run or something. Yeah, continue to pull them out. But your best chance is showing up unknown and giving your best chance to fool that fish that this artificial fly is a real fly in the river. And so I really think that like casting, you go to the store, buy a couple cheap hula hoops. If you can't, cast, put one at 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet. And if you can't hit that 20 footer at least 9 times out of 10, you got to keep working on it. And then you got to start doing the same at 30 feet. Then you got to start doing the same at 40 feet, just like shooting. I mean, we're even taking the same ranges really. So it's, you just got to get efficient with that. And being good at casting, accurate casting, and ability to manipulate that fly line, that's really, really when you see like decent anglers go to like good anglers. Like, I don't know if you've ever thought, this is just something like I've thought about it and I've talked about it before to others and they related to it. I'd be curious if you kind of felt the same. Do you feel that there's like different stages in the progression of archery elk hunting?
Oh, 100%. And that's, again, keep saying it parallels like with the fly fishing, the archery, elk hunting, mule deer hunting, hunting in general with a bow. There are very much several progressions. And I mean, when you look at, if you were going to I'm going to parallel me with both, right? So I'm where I'm at fly fishing where I was bow hunting 15 years ago or 20, meaning I am not ate up with bow hunting like I was before. I still love it, right? I still love going out. But, I don't get that, I can't wait to set my bow up or waiting literally at the door for a bow to show up, right? They come and I'm like, cool, and I'll put it together, and I don't like fletching arrows anymore, right? I'm kind of done with fletching arrows. And then on the hunting side of thing, right, where I was just excited to see something. And, now I'll be like I'm literally waiting for the fly rod like a kid to show up, right? Like literally, I have 3 bows in boxes in my garage I haven't opened yet. I'll put them together at some point. I'm literally like a 12-year-old kid waiting for this fly rod to show up, right? And I got a new fly rod, that Helios F, yesterday. And that is, and I mean, there's tons of different progressions. That's one, right? The excitement. Then there's the knowledge, right? Where you may be able to shoot, right? So let's say a guy can cast and he's amazing, accurate as can be. But he sucks at tying knots, so he's losing shit all the time. He doesn't read the river that well, and he doesn't understand fish. He doesn't understand bugs, right? That's the guy that he can shoot like crazy, and let's say he's fit as can be, but can't understand animal behavior. All of those are different tiers, right? That's different levels. And they parallel each other so much. I was laughing about it because I'm like watching, again, podcasts and YouTube videos, sucking up knowledge, and I'm like, yeah, I'm the guy I sometimes poke fun of where I'm like, just get out and do it, right? And I'm like, yeah, I still want to watch the videos and go out and do it. Again, I agree 100%.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was late the other night just like going down the rabbit hole of like headlamps, So I'm definitely one of those people that like, I don't know if it's ADD or what it is, but it's like when I focus on something, I go hardcore. But definitely with like fly fishing, I think there's like these like distinct tiers. Like the first is like starting out, and like before, not even talking about like knot tying or bud selection or anything like that. The first step is just like catching your first fish. Like that's hard, like it's not easy to catch your first fish, but once you do, it's like this milestone. And then what typically happens after that is like, then you're like excited because you caught this fish that now you just want to catch like all the fish. You want to catch all the fish in the river, you know?
Yeah.
And if you do that along the line, you've caught some big ones. So if you go out to catch all the fish, somewhere along the line, you've caught some really big ones. So then after that, you know, and all this time, your skills are advancing, your knowledge is advancing. But then you go to this phase where it's like, dude, now I want to catch the big one. Like, I just want to focus on the big ones where it's, I don't care about, you know, the 10 inches or the 12 inches. Dude, I'm starting to look for that, like, legitimate, like, you know, 22, 24, 26, you know, 26 plus type fish. And that leads you down this whole rabbit hole where you're fishing at different times of the year. You're using different systems. You know, you know, maybe you're fishing now, you're fishing more at night, you know, you're doing these different things. And so once you catch enough of the big fish, then that goes on for a while because that's really hard. And so once you do, but I find what happens after that is once you caught enough of the big fish, you know, you probably along those lines, you caught different species, you know, so maybe you got a grayling, you know, if you're here in Montana, maybe you got grayling, or you got, you know, maybe you got to go smallmouth bass fishing, or pike, you caught a pike in a river or something like that. So then once you caught enough of the big fish and you're kind of satisfied personally there, then it becomes a species chase. And then, you know, then that's, you know, like all the species I just talked about for us here in the, you know, Northern Rockies. But then that might turn into salt and bonefish, permit, tarpon. Maybe it's, you know, the Amazon, peacock bass, steelhead. You know, then you go into species chase, and that gets you traveling, that gets you doing all kinds of cool things. It's just this whole new learning curve, whole new rush, whole new excitement, you know, all these more reasons to stay up, like, excited about something, you know what I mean?
No,
and then once you go through that, yeah, and I think then, like, I think once you kind of go through that, like, I think that's, like, I think most people will probably never, I don't know, I'm just, like, totally making up numbers out of my head. But I guess most people either just get to the big fish stage or, like, stay in the big fish stage. I think, like, I think you see, like, a huge drop off where, like, maybe now you're talking about, like, 10, 20%, 30%, maybe max of the anglers that want to start, like, going diverse in species, you know, and then, you know, in the travel aspect. So it's just I think that's kind of the journey of the angler, though. And for a lot of people, and there's so much that, you know, happens in between, like, just like making your own arrows, kind of like what fly tying is to us. And dude, that's like that's a whole nother thing, man. I mean, we could talk that one forever. And there's a certain satisfaction in that, but I'd say I'm at a place kind of like you where, like, you know, I never want to tie a freaking Adams again in my life. You know, like, the idea of tying a zebra midge just drives me bonkers. You know, so I like tying streamers, kind of keeping it artistic or something. But even then, it's like a winter thing for me, you know, like turn on a football game, crack a beer, and you know, whip out a bug or two. Dude, and it's just kind of something to do. But, like,
definitely.
But, like, whereas, like, opposite of you, I'm stoked to, like, build arrows right now, you know?
Yeah, if I never built another arrow in my life, I'd be a happy man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the winter thing was definitely what I was looking at for fly tying because it's so cold, you know, here, right? And so that's something, you know, it's better than watching TV, right? I mean, whatever. And so I think I'm going to get into fly tying as well. But no, I agree with everything you just said. And I mean, obviously with bow hunting, you've got compound, traditional, different species, and then diving into, you know, the art of it, right, as you learn to tune and everything else. And I watched a video, or maybe it's a podcast, that guy, the Kelly, how do you pronounce his last name?
Gallup.
He was talking about hunting a 30-incher. And he was talking, you know, there was parameters around it, right? He's like, look, I'm not talking about where you pay to go hunt. Well, you know, he's like a true, you know, 30-inch brown trout. And, you know, not on a Rapala or whatever, like, but true 30-inch, you know, he's like, I've seen 3 in my life. And
I've never caught one.
I think I had one on, and it was big, right? Like it snapped off everything I had. And I mean, that's another thing for me. I ran a lot of 6X for, you know, the high country, you know, your brookies, right? Like, you know, yeah, dude, I'm seeing a lot of 3X now. Like, I lost again today. I hooked something. I don't know how big it was. Chris saw it. Like, once it hit the current and I couldn't get it out of it, dude, you know, I've never seen backing in my life. I'm seeing backing a lot now, right? Not a lot, but a decent amount. And when I say that, I've seen backing 3 times in the last 2 weeks. Generally when they hit the current, which is my fault too, trying to get them out of the current, it's a different world where I'm like used to running on my spinning rods. I run 4-pound tests for, high lake fishing, alpine fishing, where now shit, dude, I'm like 4X, even 3. I'm not used to, and again, that's learning. Like you talked about the different stages where, I'm not used to running that heavy of gear fly fishing. I'm running a 9-foot 6X tapered leader. And anyway, but yeah, the 30-inch fish thing was, it's like the 350 bull or the 180 mule deer, 165 whitetail, however you want to look at it. And I mean, at least when you're hunting elk and mule deer, you can see the damn things, right? You can go find them to kill them. With the fish, when you're hunting it, you're not really hunting it. I mean, you're hunting for one, unless you're sight fishing or what, you know what I mean? You can do that. But, and I'm speaking out of turn because I don't know what I'm talking about. I just started fly fishing or doing this. But, I mean,
awesome, man.
You would have to hit a lot of miles in a boat, on foot. I mean, it would to see. I mean, I've seen photos of 30-inch brown trout. It doesn't even look real. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. Oh, dude, like getting a 20-incher is like a really solid achievement, and like that's on any given time. Like if you can get a 20-incher, my God, man, you did some things right, and that's really badass. The difference between that 20-incher, which is already hard to get, and getting like that legitimate 2-footer, just 24 inches, is like, dude, it is such a monumental leap in those 4 inches to get that fish. And then to go from there to your 25, your 26, 27 or beyond, it's like, I think I listened to that, well, at least not all of it, but I listened to part of that same podcast with Kelly Gallup. And like, I think he even said it, like, it's damn near unobtainium. Like a lot of anglers, the majority of anglers will go throughout their entire life never achieving that. Like I fish a lot, compared to certainly compared to the average human being. But I mean, I fish quite a bit. I'm a single dude living in Montana, 5 minutes from a Blue Ribbon River. I fish a lot, and I mean, my biggest to date is probably only in that like 26 world. We didn't tape it, but I'd say it's maybe in that 26 world.
And I'm lucky. Really lucky, because Dan showed me what to do, and that'd be the equivalent of me taking someone somewhere hunting, or you get the idea. And he showed me what to rig up, and thank God I can cast and I'm accurate. I understand mending. I can read a river. Dude, my first trip out, I hooked a 24-inch brown. My first trip, and I knew what I did, right? I was like, get the fuck out of here. And when I say that, it was close, like the front to the back of his net is 22 inches. So, I mean, it was big, right? For my first trip out. And my number one concern when I hooked it was just, I caught it on a 22 midge. I'm like, how in the hell am I going to get? And I mean, I was spoiled, right? I didn't deserve that fish. Dan helped me out, like showed me the ropes or what to do. If I went in green with that and went on that river and didn't have YouTube or the internet, right, to figure shit out, I mean, that's a learning curve. I mean, that's going to be a while, because, nobody's just going to figure out nymphing out of the gate and knock it out of the park without some help. I mean, it's a pain in the ass enough when you know what you're doing. It's the same thing. No one's probably going to grab a compound bow, and their first trip go shoot 165, 180-inch mule deer. Very few people without help. The help thing's a big one.
Yeah, like you mentioned deserving it, and it's like, dude, you did deserve it, man. Like, you made the choice to not sit on the couch and watch Price is Right or Jeopardy or, Vanna White turn in some tiles. But, like, you made the choice to go out there and give yourself the opportunity. And, like, I mean, I think that's so much of what it is just, persistence is a bitch, man. I mean, it's just amazing what just being persistent does to you, like getting up early, staying out later, giving yourself just time on the water, and you just never know when it's going to or never going to align. But, kind of like with elk hunting, like, I mean, there's, the old saying, like, the elk are where they are. But like you mentioned it earlier in the conversation, where it's just like there's certain like habits they have, the sleep, water feed, fornication. It's kind of the same thing with fish too. Like the fish, like it's not like you don't just float down the river and think anywhere in the river is a fish. Like over time, like learning to read the water, like, I mean, I'm fishing, like if we float, like I'm actually floating with my good buddy tomorrow, just kind of doing a quote unquote scouting mission because he has to guide on Saturday. So we just want to go float and kind of see what's happening out there. Dude, you're fishing. I mean, maybe you're fishing 50% of the river, but like you're really maybe only hyper focused on like 20 or 30% of the river, So if we're doing a 10-mile float, I'm not fishing 10 miles. And I think that's kind of where like that efficiency goes in. You eventually just kind of learn that like this water is this. And it might just be sit down, make sure your knots are good, sit down, make sure you got the bug, if it's dead water, use that time to tie on a new fly if it's not working, or use that time to take a bite of a sando or, take a sip of water. That's downtime. It's not 10 miles of fishing. It's, getting to those spots and being prepared to execute properly on those spots. And that's just, all that's doing is giving you the highest likelihood of creating success. You may not, you don't know, but you're just trying to kind of create that. And that's where, like I said, this from this old timer learning efficiency is just an amazing thing. So yeah, tomorrow we'll fish like I said, sometimes you're fishing just because, there might be a fish there, or never hurts to try, right? You never really know. But also, I mean, I fished this river for 20, 30 years, and you kind of know where they are and where they're not, especially during the winter. Like in the winter, they're not everywhere. Right now, like if you catch one, you'll catch many. So if you catch one right now, like the food system right now in the winter is really small. So like in the summer, there might be, variations of mayflies, variations of stoneflies, caddis, all these different bug options, and the fish will kind of select what they want at those times. Right now, it's midges and worms. Ton of worm and a midge, and that's just given the water temperature, that subaquatic life, it's just not hatching right now. So it's right now it's those fish are piled up where you kind of know the spots. Fish eat 90-95% underneath water, only 5% top water. So right now it's a nymph game, but like right now it's just, I already kind of know what tomorrow is going to look like. I don't know what the success is going to be, but I already kind of know what tomorrow is going to look like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I mean, it's the same thing with, where I was fishing at today. I mean, it would take 2 days to fish that section if you fished all of it. I will say 100% what you said. When we're finding them, I mean, we're in them until we, quote unquote, blow them out, right? You can only be so obtrusive before they're like, I don't like it in here anymore. But I mean, they're there. The thing that I really have found interesting is like today we found those sow bugs, and there was sow.
So that's a tailwater bug. So you must have been fishing below a dam.
Way below, but yeah, several miles below.
Yeah.
But yep, exactly. And I had an egg pattern on, and I was doing pretty good with the egg pattern. Once we saw those sow bugs, some of those were the size on that paddle I was talking about. They were the size of they're like number 12s, like big sow bugs. But midges were also out because it was warming up, swarming around my head. So a midge is another possibility of what to run. So we've got scuds, sow bugs, egg patterns, and then like you said, worms. Now I haven't run worms in there much, like a San Juan worm or anything like that. But that's kind of the fun. Like you were talking about the steps is like learning all of that, and then kind of you become kind of part of nature. You kind of become a bug geek, right? You got to learn what's what when you're digging around, and so yeah, that immediately Chris threw on 2 big sow bugs and just started hammering down. And like I said, he beat the brakes off me. But with that, this is just one section, right, of river. Like you look at the big pie chart of it all, dude, it's crazy because you've got the sink tip line, weight forward line. You've got the multiple different dry nymphing, Euro nymphing. There's a lot to it. that's a lot to consume, right? That's a lot to learn. I mean, it's a lifetime. It takes.
Dude, do you want to get into gear a little bit? Well, let's. It's like we should get into gear a little bit because I'd love to talk about that because that's like one of my favorite things to talk about in fly fishing. But like, I feel bad because I have a propensity to talk a lot. Can I just tell a story real quick?
Yeah, fire away, man.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories has like most memorable. It's like in the Hall of Fame of memories in my mind. It was at a time where like I was a pretty good caster. Like I understood bugs decently well. Like, you know, I've traveled around, like fished many different rivers and spots now. So I mean, I'm an intermediate, intermediate type angler. Well, I had this fish one day. I was on this river in Southwest Montana, and I'm walk wading with my dog, and I see this fish rising, and it was like this really like kind of difficult cast because it was behind this branch in this little pocket, and it was really hard to kind of get the fly to like, you had to land it in a small pocket. It had to come off this branch just right on this little seam created by the branch. But the fish was just subsurface 10 inches, 12 inches. And he would just slowly come up and he'd slowly go down. So like, I don't want to spook this fish. And this is like a big fish at the time. I mean, I think it was about 21, 22 inch fish. And so I have a bug that I've already been catching a lot of fish on, which was a caddis. And so I cast it. I get a good cast. It comes right off the stick. I see him in the water, crystal clear water. He's coming up, looks like he's going to eat it, but then just slowly drops back down. Doesn't eat it. I'm like, you know, so it takes me a time or two, get another good cast in there. Don't spook him. He doesn't even look at it on the second drift. Like, not even amused. That fish had already made up its mind on that bug. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to be patient. Like, and this is where I'm good enough to know just like, okay, this fish is not going to eat this. So like I sat down, opened up my fly box, grab another fly, you know, I don't remember what it was, maybe a blue wing or something like that. I don't know. But like cast, you know, get a good cast on it. Doesn't even move. Do another fly. Doesn't even move. Do another fly. Doesn't even care. So then I end up going back to a caddis, but one size smaller. So I think I was fishing maybe like call it a 16. So I took the exact same tan colored caddis, elk hair caddis, went down one size, got a cast on him. As soon as that fly got over him, he charged in and took it. And that was like one of the best things that ever happened to me. Like, not only did I catch a fish and it was just like an awesome thing, but just like that learning lesson of just like, all right, dude, don't cast 20 times on this fish. Like, he doesn't want it. Like, going through the process, making the right cast, and then getting the reward of getting that. It's like I said, it's in like Hall of Fame of like my fly fishing experiences.
Yeah, well, and as it should be, and again, that does parallel the same kind of, you know, with the hunting side of things. And you know, when you were talking about earlier, like geeking out on gear, you know, the 9'5" weight is kind of like the do-all, rod. And if you were suggesting to someone that's looking, and I'm only saying this because I'm getting not hounded in a good way. People are messaging me like, anytime somebody asks me, I generally just say, hey, you know, what are you fishing? And then, yep, 9'5" weight. But what are the primary, like, what do you need to get going? Like, what, you know, but no budget at all. Like, I would just want to hit the water. What do they need to get like rocking and rolling? What do you suggest? And not just a rod. I mean, everything, right?
I get it. Yeah, no, dude, honestly, I love this question. Just cause like, I couldn't imagine starting into my fly fishing journey, you know, at my age, your age, you know, later in life, just because of how intimidating it is. So I commend anybody that does actually do it. You know, I learned at such a young age, like all that time of like sucking, I don't remember, you know what I mean? And so like to get started, main thing I tell people is like, just don't let yourself get intimidated. Like when it comes down to the bare bones, you just need a rod and reel. You know, if you're trout fishing, again, probably 9'5" weight. Fly lines, there's an infinite amount of fly lines. And that can be a really, you know, kind of intimidating category. But just don't skimp on a fly line. Like I always say there's like good rods, great rods, and exceptional rods. There's no such thing as a bad rod. I've never cast a fly rod and not been able to like, you know, catch a fish, right? But I can take like a $200 rod and make it feel really good with the right fly line. I can also take $1,000 $100+ rod and make it feel like complete garbage with the wrong fly line. So get yourself a good rod. There's all kinds of great package rods out there. You know, we make the Encounter. We also make the Clearwater, which you talked about earlier. That Clearwater is a great rod, man. For the price, I mean, and with that, you can get a kit that comes with the rod, reel, and then on the reel, you have your backing and fly line. And so get a good all-purpose fly line. And what that relates to is the taper of the fly line. So, like, a fly line is not just a fly line. It's not a straight piece of string. It has a taper, a particular shape to it. And that shape is going to kind of dictate what it does. And so in the front of the fly line, like what would hook to your leader, that's called a front taper. That's a real important part. And I often describe it kind of like a hammer. Like if I hand you a hammer and say, drive the nail, and you grab the hammer, you could drive the nail, right?
Yep.
But if you turn that hammer around and you're holding the metal end, and then you try to smack the nail with that, you know, wooden handle of the hammer, can you drive the nail as effectively?
No.
Exactly. You know, but why? Like it weighs the same. You know, let's call it a 1 pound hammer. It weighs the same, but it's because the distribution of the mass. So when you're holding a hammer, having all that mass on the end, that's what it's going to kind of dictate it. So if you have a short taper, think like ultimate hammer effect. When you have like a reversed hammer, that's a long front taper. That's going to be delicacy. So, and then somewhere in between is going to be all purpose. And so, you know, what are each of those good for? A short taper is good for turning over, you know, a large bobber and those tungsten nymphs and those heavier nymph systems. Whereas a long front taper that, you know, promotes delicacy, it's gonna lay down quieter and smoother on the water when you're presenting a single dry fly, you know, say on a lake or a slow moving river that's low and clear. It's going to be a more delicate system, less obtrusive to the environment. And then in between, you have an all purpose where it's got enough mass up front that it can turn over all those systems, but it also like is long and delicate enough that it can present a dry fly well. Most anglers are going to start there, and that's where they should start. I mean, that's why we make, you know, the industry, not just us at SA, but the industry makes a ton of all-purpose fly lines. For us, we make, you know, the Infinity, all things, right? So the Infinity, the MPX, those types of things, those are all-purpose fly lines. So once you have a real rod, a good fly line, you need, a lot of times to start out, you need leaders and tippet. Until you get proficient at knots, you're going to go through a lot more leaders. Like, I don't go through that many leaders in a year now because I'm using tippet to extend on. And all tippet is, to the person that doesn't know in this conversation, tippet is just a piece of level line that you tie on the end of a leader to keep extending that leader. So a leader goes from your fly line to the fly, and it's a piece of clear, you know, copolymer, you know, nylon or fluorocarbon, but it tapers down and it transfers that energy of the fly line into the fly. And so over time, as you keep cutting, you know, tying on flies and cutting on flies, you keep cutting that back inch by inch, right? And so tippet comes in because then you can extend the leader out another foot or 2 feet or 3 feet or whatever, so that that butt section of the leader, I can now have a butt section of the leader on my, you know, line damn near the whole year, you know. But in the beginning, before you learn all that, you know, you're going through a lot of leaders. So get yourself some leaders and tippet. And then you need hemo, as far as tools, you need hemos and nippers. You walk into a fly shop, man, and there is just this abundance of stuff. And you you'll eventually learn what it is and why you need it. But until like you're on the river and you say, oh, I need this, you probably don't need it. So get yourself a good set of hemos, get yourself a pair of nippers, and hemos you're using to, you know, hold the hook like kind of on the fly or pull out of a fish's mouth, something like that. Nippers, that's just for cutting your monofilament back when you're tying knots. You get yourself that. And then really what comes down to after, and I think this is what most people overlook, bugs. Like, buy yourself flies. I mean, just like that story I just told you about where I went through 5 or 6 different flies to catch that fish, you just got to have an abundance of flies. See so many times, like, you know, I spend a lot of time at fly shops, and I can't tell you how many times I see people come in and they buy like 3 flies, all different patterns. It's like, I don't even buy, if I buy a fly, like I don't buy less than 12 of it. you know? I mean, but I would say for the average person, start at bare minimum 3 of that fly, because nothing sucks more than finding the one fly that works and then you break it off on a fish and you don't have another one. I mean, so always like when you have a pattern, buy it in 3 sticks, 12, whatever you can, but focus on building out a good thing of flies. And with everything I just described, you're like well on your way. And really, it isn't until you kind of get good enough at casting that you're going to be able to tell what fly line I need, or until you're good enough at entomology and reading the river that you're going to understand, you know, what bug or something like that. So start with the diversity of that. Those things, I mean, you can get rods starting from $150 to $1,200, you know, so depending on where you're in that. But like I said, don't skip on fly line and don't skimp on flies. I would also say don't skimp on leader and tippet, because that is the weakest. You know, again, seen so many people that buy $1,000 fly rod and they buy a $500 reel and $130 fly line. You know, so they're what? They're now $1,600, you know, over $1,600 into it, and then they buy cheap leader and tippet. When leader and tippet, that is the weakest connection between you and the fly. So if anything's going to break in the connection of you and a fish, let's say you hook a big fish, like the weakest connection is that leader and tippet. So like, don't skimp on that. You know, I work for Scientific Anglers. We make a product called Absolute, which we've been incredibly proud of just because it is third-party tested and proven, like strongest material in the game. And against the competition, it can be a pound to 2 pound difference. And that's on a 6 pound material. So on a 6 pound material, you tie a knot in it. When you tie a knot in leader tippet, it gets weaker. It absorbs water, the knots swell. It just creates, and you know, it's creating friction against itself. It just gets weaker. So our material focuses on what happens when it's actually in a knot and getting wet. And so it doesn't absorb as much water, etc. But that material absolutely creates an advantage over the others. So those are the areas, like, you can save money on a reel. It's like, if you buy a Chevy truck and you don't love the wheels, you know, the rims on it, dude, you can go out and buy yourself a new set of rims, but is it really changing anything for you other than aesthetics? That's kind of what a reel is. A reel is, until you get into some of the bigger game species, you know, with salt stuff, a reel up here, it's your bling. It's what a rod doesn't look all that fancy at distance, but you can see a reel shining, you know? So save money on the reel, use money on fly line, use money on, get the best rod you can, regardless of price point, just get the best one you can, but get a good fly line, a lot of flies, and good leader and tippet, and you're well on your way.
So on the bug side of things, you brought that up, and it is confusing on the fly line for sure. on the bugs, I think, like, giving some direction on that, I guess, is what I would say. So like, I have specific dry flies that I've always liked since I was a kid, and you know, and they're the Irresistible, the Adams, you know, the normal ones you would think of, and then whatever it's called, the Blue Wing Olive. I think I'm saying that right. I can't remember all the different names, but there's some basic ones. What are some? I mean, for people listening in, right? So I always, when I'm like on my backcountry kit, right? I've got some bead-headed brassies. I've got princes. I've got some sandworms. I got a little bit of everything. What are you suggesting for people that are like, how would I know? What are, like, list your top 5 dry flies, top 5 nymphs, if that's even possible.
I mean, it's possible, but it's so like river driven too. Cause like, I mean, when you mentioned sow bug earlier, I immediately said that's a tailwater. So you were fishing tailwater. And so the difference is there's tailwaters and there's freestones. A tailwater is something that like is below a dam. So it to some degree, it kind of has an artificial environment because most dams are bottom fed. So like right now, like for example, on like during the winter, the top of the lake is frozen, but the bottom of the lake's not. Well, that water is coming from the bottom of the lake, and it's going to hold a more consistent temperature throughout the year. That totally changes the aquatic life. Where like what I live on is what's called a freestone river. So it's not obstructed by man in any way. Like our river is solely based upon snow runoff. And that again, totally changes the aquatic life of the river. So there is no like, I mean, I will simplify. I'll just make it as well. I can simplify the bugs, but like fish, there's a certain amount of like speed. So you have mayflies, but then there's all these subcategories of mayflies. So your blue wings, you can also call them betas, blue wings, your PMDs. The only difference really between a PMD and a blue wing is one is brown and one is green. You have trichos, they're black, but the male can sometimes be yellow, but they all look the same. And if you've ever seen like, fly land on you and the wings stick straight up, that's a mayfly. But when you see like a fly and the wings kind of laid back, that's probably a caddis. And so mayflies and caddis are two of the top like types. And when you go to a fly shop and you look at like hundreds of these little bins of flies, like let's say blue wings, 20, 30, 40 of the bins can just be blue wings. So they're all there mimicking the same thing. It's just like going into 31 flavors of ice cream and which one do you prefer, And do you want sprinkles on top, maybe a little chocolate syrup? If you could heat it up, that'd be great, right? So, that's where it's so easy to get confused. Yeah, that's that's part of the reason why, again, it could be so confusing. You walk into all these bugs. Well, it's like, it's mayflies, it's caddis, it's stoneflies, which are, like the larger, that's where your salmon flies, your goldens, they're like the larger big wing. Now we're talking like a 1 inch, you're using a foam fly. But there's, again, all kinds of subcategories of stoneflies. Then you got terrestrials. Those are like beetles, grasshoppers, those, like those larger things that maybe not be fully aquatic animals, but like, when like you talk about like a good chance to go fish around here. I live in an environment with a lot of haying. When the rancher next to you is going to go haying next to the river, and they're haying the whole wheat field, and all those hoppers are pushing towards the river. That could be a great time to go fishing if you know. So there's, terrestrials. So there's all these different types. So within those, there's all those subcategories. And that's where like, I think that part of the reason why I like this industry so much is just because I do think that there is like a certain amount of sustainability to it, in that, you can watch all the YouTube videos you want on which rod you want to get or which line or what reel or whatever. But there's nowhere you can go online that's going to tell you how the river is going to fish that day. And that's where just like finding a reputable, good fly shop next to you. And like, when you go in, don't just ask them for questions. If they give you information, buy, a dozen bugs from them or something, but like, and if you do, that's the best thing you could do. Cause like, say 100 people come to a fly shop a day. Those guys, they can't send 100 people to the same spot on the river, right? So, if you build a rapport, you become a good customer, they're going to start to feed you a little bit better information, there's always kind of those low-hanging spots. And then there's some of those ones that you might get a little extra nugget or something. But that's where I do really think that this industry is special, is that we really do rely on those, core fly shops that have guides on the river every day. And every day those guides are coming back and giving a report of this is what's happening. This is what's happening here, there. And like, a hatch, a river, let's say a river is 50 miles long. Just because there's a hatch happening in 10 miles of the river doesn't mean that hatch is happening 10 miles up. Those are dictated by water temp. The river is typically going to get warmer the further downriver you go. So you have your snow runoff. It creates all these creeks. It comes together and creates a bigger river. It goes, from streams and creeks into a river. Then that river is going to continue to pick up streams as it goes down the valley. And as it does, it's typically going to get shallower, wider, and warmer. And so the hatches are not always consistent. So just creating that rapport at a local fly shop goes so freaking far, man, on being able to go out and have some success. Over time, you do that enough, you're going to eventually figure it out yourself, right? But, like, I haven't fished my local river in, a couple months now. Like, dude, I have no idea what's happening out there to the most part, And so you just got to find what information you can, and the local fly shop is your best source.
So I can speak to that, just working at so many different pro shops, and it sounds like that's a parallel as well. You really don't want to walk. Well, I'll dive into it and you'll laugh, or maybe not laugh, maybe nod your head and agree. You don't want
Cringe.
to, yeah, you don't want to go buy your bow online and then walk into a pro shop and expect that pro shop to give you the same service that somebody that just dropped 3K on a full setup. And you also can't really expect to go to a pro shop in only emergencies or whatever and not have that rapport with them than someone else that's in there all the time. Now that doesn't mean you have to go be a shop rat, right? But like if you're
100%, yeah.
if you're going to and I buy shit from Amazon, but if you're going to Amazon and buying all your stuff and then you walk into your pro shop to have them teach you how to use it, your pro shop's probably thinking, what a fucking dick, as they should be. Spend the money.
I totally agree, man.
Yeah, spend the money at the local pro shop, the local fly shop, as much as you possibly can. Now, obviously, not are pro shops more expensive than the cheapest place you can find online? Yeah, probably. But that pro shop's not just giving you gear; they're giving you a service. They're giving you knowledge, and so there's take care of the people around you, I guess is what I'm getting at. And when I say that, like, you might get some nuggets. That might be one thing as far as fishing spots. It also may be you might just learn all of the things that when you dive into it, they may have casting classes where you can dive in, or they may just show you a few tips or tricks, things like that, explain to you the tapered leaders because it's super fucking confusing. So take care of your local pro shop. I agree with that 100%, both in archery and in fishing.
Yeah, man. I think that's like, I think that like, I do consider myself like an extremely fortunate person just because I've been able to like, create a living in an industry that I'm extremely passionate about. And it's, I call this like a want industry, not a need industry. So it's like people want bows, people want fly rods, but none of us need them. When push comes to shove, that can get taken out of the budget pretty quick. So it's, we just got to appreciate it. And I mean, I do generally believe that ultimately, like, what pennies you try to save, maybe with like an online purchase or something. And it's not to say you can buy like a reputable brand, a good product, maybe at a different place. But I do think that, a little bit of investment up front, the amount that you're going to get back, not just in like the quality of the product that maybe comes with a lifetime guarantee or something like that, but the knowledge, man, the knowledge and the experience that you're going to get from, these locals that are literally living or breathing this is completely invaluable. And I just think that's part of what's so cool about our industry is that I think we tend to kind of ride the waves of like the greater like macro industries just because it is a hobby, it is a passion that people want to invest in. And it really does kind of come down to, local people in a local spot with knowledge,
Yeah, no, I agree. And, it's also, you're probably going to meet some friends there, right? You might meet somebody that takes you under their wing and actually shows you it's a good environment. And I have, I don't know how many fly shops I have around me, but I mean, there's not really any in Riverton and Lander. There's a couple, one's more of a D2C, but you can go in there. But, the thing when you're diving into any of this, like, Jeff went into like the initial gear, you want to make sure that, and this parallels bow hunting and archery too, put as much into knowledge as you're putting into gear. And I really focus and force that onto people is when I say that, it may look like a dork. I'd go pick up a bug on aquatic insects. Like, go grab a book on aquatic insects. Like, learn as much as you can on that. And then you brought it up earlier, practicing casting. Man, that's a huge one. And I mean, you can bring your buddy over. Maybe don't drink initially. Make a contest of it. Just like if you're shooting 3Ds, you can set up, I don't want to say a course, but kind of, where you're practicing with that and then learning like the art, like again, the knots. It becomes to where, you're part of it. It's not just a hobby, air quotations, right? It's part of you. And I think that's important to be the best you can be at something.
Yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head where, it's exciting to like learn about the rods and learn about the shiny reel and fancy fly lines. that's exciting. And it's like something tangible, something you can like grab, you can see it. Like you can go to the store, purchase it, and like have this like intrinsic reward of it. Whereas like getting knowledge is so much more of a slow process, that you don't get those, you don't find those big nuggets. It's literally scrapping out like piece of gold by piece of gold. You don't typically walk away with this big nuggets. But like you and your, like, I mean, all your outdoor pursuits, did you ever have anything like in your archery or fly fishing or just hunting in general in the outdoors, this like monumental leap in like light bulb type moment in something?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think like one of the ones where it's like was truly like where people can understand it, and it's hard to say, because one of the things that you'll learn that'll be a light bulb, moment is you know, um, in hunting, patience kills everything. Patience kills any animal if you wait long enough. And when I say that,
Mm-hmm.
meaning, rushing in, whatever else, like you literally, if you don't screw it up and you do everything right, you'll kill that animal. That's easier said than done. I don't know how much that parallels to fishing, but like when I say that, one of the biggest moments when I picked up a recurve, I was blown away at how close I could get to an animal because I had to be patient. Where I wasn't with a
Mm-hmm.
compound, I didn't have to be. That was one of those things where it's basically like, you know what? If you don't let the animal know you're there, they will keep doing exactly what they have been doing. The fact in your mind you're worried about them leaving, running away, or whatever else is all in your mind. They are going to keep doing what they have been doing the entire time you've been watching them. That's probably not the answer you were looking for, but that was one of those things where it's like patience will kill anything. The other thing too, and I don't know if this is an aha moment, but when you're constantly looking around wondering why these 10% kill everything, what are you doing wrong? They put in more work, right? They put in more work. That's why they kill more. And when I say work, not just hard work, right? Not just like running, not just, they've become a master. They've learned the art of what they're doing, and it's hard for people to grasp that. But what would you say if you grab a brand new person and you tutored him, or that Kelly dude or whoever else, if you tutored that person every day, what would it take for them to become, quote unquote, a master in fly fishing? How long?
Oh man, I've never even thought about this question. Um,
Let me
Man, I
reword
feel
it.
like well, no, oh, sorry, feel free, go ahead.
Well,
I think I
how long
understand what
would
you're saying though.
how long would it take for you could let them go pretty much anywhere in North America and you'd feel solid they would catch fish?
I kind of feel that it's two part on kind of what you just talked about. It's like how much work is somebody willing to put in? Because
And
like I can teach them, like we could go to the river and we could practice casting for an hour. If they go home and spend another hour, 2 or 3 at home, like it becomes like this exponential like growth rate, right?
and let me
Whereas like,
this is, I'm glad you're answering it this way. What I'm saying is I sent them to your boot camp and they had 8 hours a day. You didn't have to worry about them going home and doing their part. You had total control of them 8 hours a day. How long would it take for them to be able to go? I say, let's just stick from Nebraska west, right? Just Western United States. They could go anywhere in the Western United States and catch fish. If you had them
I
8
would
hours a day.
say, I would say I could send them to the river optimistic that they have a decent chance in like maybe 7 to 10 days. And I think that's like kind of on the light side. But like, I think it'd be for like, let's say that was like in this scenario, let's call it a stationary environment, right? So like, we're not changing seasons. We're not talking any of that. Just like somewhat predictable. I think I could coach somebody on a predictable river. I could get them out fishing in 2 3 days, something like that. But I feel like I could send them out like comfortably where they would have the patience to like walk up to the river and stare at it for 10 or 20 minutes before they made their first cast and say, "Oh, I see this bug." and then be able to say, oh, that bug's wings are doing this, therefore it must be this. And then like choose that from their fly box and then have a decent enough cast, have the ability to do the right knot and then make a decent cast to give themselves that chance. I think that would be like kind of 7 to 10 days ish if we're doing like, call it an 8-hour day class. But I think like I could also like, 2 to 3 days would be like, all right, dude, here's ultimate basics, God rest your soul, right?
Yeah, and I think that, if you added to that, if you had them a month, it would be exponentially. I mean, they could probably go in a month just about anywhere. And when I say that, within reason, right? Because you've taught them how to read the river, how to cast bugs, knots, everything else, within reason, they would be in high success. The problem is if they're not doing their part and they just come in periodically, it's going to take them years. So you have to do your part. And the same thing with archery, right? If I show you how to shoot one day and you don't shoot your bow again for a month or two, you're not improving, right? You have to put in work. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're just a casual fisher person, right? Or a casual fly fisherman or whatever else. It's just, don't be mad when you go out and you don't catch any fish because you just haven't put in the work. Same with bow hunting. You got to put in the work.
100%, man. And I can't tell you how, I can't tell you how many times, like, I've gone to the river with my dog, and I'm like not super motivated to go fishing, kind of just want to like get out, walk the dog, not be around the house, And I go to the river with the fly rod in my hand, and I sit on the river, and I end up like never even casting a fly line, and just kind of content, just like, oh, you know what? I've never walked past this part of the river. Let's just go see what's around the next river bend. Or, oh, there's a pod right here. Let's just kind of see what these fish do. And I mean, there's so many, it's part of what I love so much about like fly fishing and archery and these types of things is that it really is like a lifetime sport. Like it's not something you'll ever perfect. You'll never hit the bullseye 100% of the times. You'll never make a perfect cast, The conditions even if you do, the conditions won't always be perfect where the animal is even there. But like with fly fishing, it's like, I'm starting to think about some of the details. It's like you talked about earlier, mentioned kind of like where we're talking about catching big fish. I'm just, kind of looking at the water blankly, see, I don't think about that. Cause like, let's say we see a pot of fish rising. So there's 5 or 6, 2, 3, 5, 6, whatever fish rising in a given space. My first instinct is to kind of look at what's the big. I don't have the best eyesight, and that kind of took me a while to be able to look at like a rising fish that you have a limited time to stare at it. You can't just like put a spotting scope on it and stare at it. You have this like glimpse of a moment where this fish comes up and eats, and in that given time frame, you need to be able to try to assess its mouth and then the measurement between its dorsal fin and its tail fin, and try to assess like the size of this fish. And so like if I'm looking at a pot of fish, my first thought is, what's the biggest one? Because like if I make a cast, I could just cast to the very front fish, and not have my fly drift over the other fish, and maybe I catch that fish. If I do, then I just blew out the other fish. But if I want to catch that big one, then I'm gonna just spend a couple minutes, man, whatever it takes, just a couple minutes usually, and just kind of like, okay, this furthest one away from me, third back from the front, that's the biggest fish. And then I'm going to focus my efforts on like, I'm not going to worry about the first 2 fish. And if my fly scares them or something, I just want to get like the right presentation on this fish. And so it's like, again, this is just my only point of this is just talking about how this is never ending, it's a never ending pursuit. And I feel the same way with like archery. There's no way, like, I mean, every scenario, like I compare it a lot to golf. Do you ever golf?
No, I just thank God, because I can't handle another hobby like that, because I'd get immersed in that too.
Oh, I totally get it. But I think about it more in the sense of like my grandpa, when he was older and retired, he retired on this like golfing community, right? And for like, man, 5, 10 years, whatever it was, he played essentially the same golf course his whole life. and he never got bored of that golf course. Like, and I always thought about that. Like, and that's because, like, when he goes out and plays, you know, when he gets up on the first tee box, his drive never goes to the same place. You know, so every time he plays that golf course, something goes different. And that's what keeps, like, that interest. And it's the same way with fly fishing. Like I live, again, on a freestone river where the river fluctuates all the time. I mean, literally 24 hours here, man, can be the difference of, like, perfect fishing conditions and, like, dude, I wouldn't even take a boat on it. So it's just, you know, every time you approach these environments, you go into the mountains, you know, like, weather's doing this, the elk are going to do this, you know, wind's blowing this way. So instead of coming in from this side, you're going to come in from this side. And so it's just, you can approach these environments hundreds of thousands of times, but never have the same experience. And I think that's crazy.
No, but I mean, I don't know. There's some saying about the man going in the mountain, but the man didn't. I can't remember the hell saying. Yeah, it's different every time. And I mean, when I say it's different every time, I mean, that's a good analogy on the golf side of things, because, like, right now, one of the things going on, like, it's getting warmer, the temperature changed. Midges are out. They're starting to come out more. Also, the current, right? The flow is changing because snow is melting. And, you know, like, it's pretty crazy when you look at somebody that's a true master. And let's say, and I am not a master in martial arts. You take a master in jiu-jitsu, you take a master in archery and fly fishing or whatever else. And then you think you're good and you go hang out. You know, it's like putting a, you know, whatever, blue belt against a black belt, right? You know, you think you're good and then go hang out with them for a day and you're like, yeah, I suck. This guy knows everything. But he's had a lifetime, you know, to learn that. And like you said, your dad playing on the same, you know, golf course, it was different every time. You know, someone may be just an expert on a specific river or whatever else, or I don't know, whatever you want to pick it. That, you know, the thing is when you meet someone like that, like that Kelly guy, right? He seems to be, specifically streamers, kind of world renowned for that, and a master at that. You know, consuming everything that he's talking about and learning. I mean, it took him who knows how long to be, you know, that good. And again, I think once somebody gets immersed in something, that's what I guess everybody's chasing, is perfection, right? I mean, if they're truly, you know, engulfed in what they're doing.
Yeah, and do you ever experience like like you talked about how many arrows do you fletch over the years? Did you ever, like, you know, I'm at a stage where, like, I'm still, like, watching videos and listening to others to kind of get inspiration for the arrow that I want to build. Like, did you ever get to a time in your arrow builds where you're like, no, like, I know, like, I'm going to try this. Like, given this what I want to do, I want to try this with this. I'm going to bring my FOC here. I'm going to, you know, do this type of, you know, helical or this type of fletch on my back or whatever, where you kind of got creative and you kind of started going your own route, not knowing what the results, or having some anticipation of what the results are going to be, but just because of experience, you just had an assumption.
Yeah. I mean, the thing, like, and a ton of over the years, of course. And I think, though, you know, probably once you get to at a, you know, a certain level, you kind of just are like, this is it. This what works. And I'm not really trying anything new. You know what I mean? So when I say that, you know, that's part of,
you're well past that level, man.
Yeah. Well, I just, you know, I got to, you know, now, and for the last several years, it's just like, I dabble, right? I screw around with different things. Of course, I'm a gear guy too, right? So I'm always going to, you know, dabble or whatever else. But there's definitely, when you're doing that, you're learning, right? When you're trying, you're writing your own book, your own chapter, you're learning that entire time. And then when you're done jacking around with all that, then that's kind of like you're in the last few chapters of your book, and it's probably just more stories than it was the learning and the adventure, right? And when I say that, you know, once you get good enough at something, that newness or whatever is gone, of like that excitement to try new things or whatever else, and you're just doing the task. And, you know, with archery, I'm definitely to the point now where I'm not as excited about diving into different things because I know what works and I'm going to continue doing that, and I'm just going to go hunting. Now, like you're talking about with fishing, I don't know how many years in front of me of like dabbling, like you're talking about, trying to figure shit out. The other thing too, which is way off the subject, the good thing about fly fishing is it is low impact on the knees, and my knees are catching up with me from packing out too many animals. That's kind of a highlight of that.
Man,
yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, fly fishing definitely is a lower impact thing, and it's definitely something you can carry on later in your life. I mean, I'm already having problems with my knees just because of my early days of trying to be crazy skiing, you know. But going back to our previous point, you know, you do get past that, and that, you know, as soon as you said that, we were like, dude, I'm over it. That's kind of how I feel too, where, you know, I don't explore as much with putting different fly lines on different rods and all this. That's why, like, when you and I were first started talking, you're like, hey, dude, this is where I am. This is what I'm fishing. And I'm like, dude, you need X, Y, and Z. Because it's just, I've done all the other things, you know? And so you can easily kind of peg that just as like you can. That level, I do think it's a level where, like, shit on some of the like online reviews or, you know, YouTube videos, which I think in all are an overwhelming positive.
Yeah.
I think the downside is if people take it as it has to be like this linear, and it has to stay within these guardrails. It's like, I've brought this up earlier in the conversation where I talked about why do we call it 5-weight a 5-weight? Well, that's because it's 140 grains. And so fly fishing comes down to really kind of mass and weight. And so, like, if you cast a conventional rod, which most people have, you know, the lures are often, they're rated by weight, right? Quarter ounce, whatever, ounce, whatever. And that mass, when you cast, that mass is pulling that thin, clear line out of the rod, you know, through the rod, out of the reel, and carrying that across whatever given distance. But with fly fishing, you have this light, air-resistant fly that floats. And so it's not dragging anything. So a fly line is mass. That's why, like, if you look at, you know, a 3-weight line and a 5-weight fly line, a 5-weight is thicker. If you look at a 5-weight line and an 8-weight line, the 8-weight is thicker. The difference being the amount of weight, the amount of mass that fly line is. And so it's kind of like, fly fishing is honestly kind of a quirky thing. It's kind of funny how everything turned out to be the way it is. But there's actually only 2 things regulated in fly fishing. One of them is fly line weights. Could you possibly guess what the other one is? I'll give you 3 guesses. 1 to 3 guesses, your choice.
So no, say the question again. I want to make sure I don't screw this up. One of them's fly line weight.
Yeah. So there's only 2 things that are like have parameters and are like regulated in fly fishing. One of them is the weight of the fly line. The second one is, could you possibly guess?
I mean, it would seem like they would have to marry up to the weight of the rod, but I could be. What is it?
It's the size of the reel seat on the reel. The reel seat being that little lip that connects to your rod. That's why every reel from every brand fits on every rod.
Oh, I see what you're saying now. I got you. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's so a 5-weight line, getting back on the premise, is if a 5-weight line is 140 grains, and those 140 grains are measured from the tip of the fly line for 30 feet back. So if you look at like the back of the fly box, which I'm sure like most people don't really assess, honestly has like a wealth of information. And having worked in that house at, you know, with Scientific Anglers, it's actually insane how much time we spend thinking about the back of the fly box and how we present the information on there. So I talked earlier about tapers of fly lines and how like the hammer effect and how it can deliver different things. Because it is just, again, just like arrows with bows. You shoot one bow, but you can create several different arrows for different scenarios. And with fly fishing, it comes down to mass. So like, again, a 5-weight at 140 grains like that just over the years, that's just kind of become what was adequate to turn over a large foam hopper or salmon fly, but also delicate enough to present a small 20 trico. And so that's what you're changing when you're going throughout grain weight. So like the reason why you use a 6 weight or a 7 weight when you're casting streamers is because you're getting a heavier fly line that has the ability to carry energy through the fly line, pulling those larger bugs. And like, you know, then when you go to bass, most bass people are using 7 or 8 weights, but bass aren't any bigger than trout. You know, they're relatively the same size. So why using an 8 weight on a sub 5 pound fish? Well, because you're throwing these large wind resistant bugs that are mimicking, you know, frogs or large, you know, bait fish or something like that. And so it really, fly fishing, those different weights of rods, that's dictated by what you're trying to cast, not so much just the species. I mean, the adverse would be like if you're trying to catch, you know, a tarpon, you're using a 12 weight, but you're not using a 12 weight because you're casting a streamer that's no bigger than what you're casting for a trout. But at that point, you're using a larger, stronger rod because you're tugging on a 100+ pound fish.
Yeah, no, that makes
But so sense. mass of the fly rod is really the dictator of it all.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense, and you hear, and thank God some of like a lot of this stuff. Well, I say a lot. Some of these things I knew, some I didn't. That one was I learned at a very young age. The thing is luckily now with like YouTube, people do really good at explaining, you know, that because like when I say that, meaning, you know, what you're chunking out there. And Kelly actually talked about something recently where, you know, he's talking about running streamers with a 6 weight, that most people do not get the full measure of their back cast. And so with a stiffer rod, like a 7 weight or an 8 weight, and they would be better off running a streamer with a 6 weight because it would probably help them learn to load up the rod on the back cast more. And then he kind of dove into a bunch of other stuff after that. But, you know, he's like, look, it has nothing to do with the size of the fish unless, like you said, you get into tarpon. It has to do with the thing you're chunking, you know, out there. And so,
yeah,
it's a lot to learn. But man,
do you want to hit on that a little bit?
I was going to say, you hit on that. I've been on the river all day and I was pounding water. I need to pee. You hit on that. I'll be back in a second.
All right, man. I'll just blindly talk here.
Good luck. All right, I'll be right back.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So to what he's saying, yeah, the rod size is going to dictate that, but then there's differences within the rods. And I think a term that we hear very commonly in our industry is fast action. And so what we've, I think as industry and kind of as consumers have derived that to be is like a stiffer rod, meaning that it flexes more at the tip. It's stiffer all the way through the rod and flexes more at the tip. And then you would have something that's more of a mid-flex rod or something that loads all the way down to the butt. And I think this is one of the bigger misconceptions in the industry is just kind of what are they? And I think a lot of people have heard that they need a fast action rod. And really fast action correlates to kind of 2 things. It's the culmination of actually kind of how stiff it is, whether, you know, how hard or soft it is to bend, but also how fast it recovers what's under a bend. And so that's why, like with Orvis, we offer 2 different series. We offer the Helios F and we offer the Helios D. The Helios D stands for distance, F standing for finesse. Where with the D, it's going to be a quote unquote stiffer rod or it's still a 5 weight, let's say, but it's going to load more just at the tip. You're going to have a longer lever. And so that's going to allow you to fling, certainly larger bug systems, but you're definitely going to be throwing tighter loops. Whereas with the F, which we call finesse, is more of a mid-flex rod. So if you look at its flex profile, when you put, 140 grains, again, a 5-weight line on it, it's going to load more around the middle. And a lot of people think that they need this stiffer rod. And I'm kind of the field where that's actually kind of adverse to what you need, in that it's not going to be as a manipulatable rod. It might seem easier in the beginning, but that's just because you have a longer lever to flick a piece of string off the end. When you become adequate at your casting and capable in your casting, you'll find that you'll receive a lot more benefits by having a deeper, mid flex or even deeper loading rod. You can just mimic the line more. And that's so much of what fly fishing is being able to cast to the fish is one thing, but I would say like casting is 5% of the battle. 95% of the battle and what actually fishing is maintaining the line. So being able to mend a distance, lift line, manipulate your fly line before it lands on the water by doing something like a reach cast. And by using a deeper loading rod, you just get a little bit more ability to mimic it. So I have no idea if you're still on the line or not.
Oh,
I've been. See if you are.
Nope, I'm back. So I only caught half of that probably, but when I have that the Helios, I got a 6-weight Helios F yesterday.
Yeah.
It has, and I'm a rookie, sorry. So it has kind of a feeling of a 5-weight to a certain degree. And when I say a 5-weight,
100%.
If I grabbed a bunch of other rods and comparing them to other rods, it would feel kind of like a 5-weight, except it handles the cast a little bit better. And I don't know if I'm articulating this correctly, but like I have a couple other rods, 5-weight rods, 9 foot. And you compare the two of them. This one is a little bit more accurate and a little bit smoother, I guess I would say, as a 6-weight, but I'm able to handle yarding out all of that stuff with a little bit more finesse. And I'm probably doing a horrible job of explaining it. And I didn't plan on getting that specific rod. All I was thinking
honestly, man,
no, go ahead.
No, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead.
No, honestly, I'm impressed by like the feedback that you have, because like everything you're picking up is absolutely correct. When we're talking about grain weights, kind of like a trend that's happened in the fly fishing industry is that it's kind of like, again, kind of use the golf reference. It's kind of like every guy that goes out to buy a new driver wants a driver that drives like 10 yards further, right? And I think that's kind of what happened in our industry, where people wanted to go out, they wanted to cast rods, and they wanted to be the hero, and they wanted to cast 60, 80, 100 feet. And in the grand scheme of things, that's like taking a 100-yard shot at an elk. You just don't do it. That scenario almost never comes up. Maybe you're doing a second follow-up shot or something, but like in fly fishing, the 80-90% of the fish are caught 25 feet and in.
Yeah, I was gonna say 30 from everything I'm doing, and mostly 20.
Yeah,
I think a river runs through it. Probably fucked that up a little bit. Being honest,
we call that quote unquote. That's the movie in our industry. Like that changed stuff. It completely changed the fly fishing industry forever. That was like the biggest boom outside of COVID. That was the biggest boom that ever happened to fly fishing. The movie,
rightfully so. It's a great. I mean, I love that movie.
Phenomenal movie.
In with the fly fishing that I've done, and there's a lot of alpine lake fly fishing, and that's packing in float tubes or just on shore, and a ton of like small creeks, like basically for like brookies, a ton of brookie fishing. On the lake with the float tube was probably the farthest I've ever wanted, needed, or had to cast when I didn't have to, but meaning yarding it out there was a good thing, because I slowly would strip it in. I had more to work with on a big flat lake, but I didn't necessarily have to. On a river, I mean, shit, dude, I'd have to see the river, but I don't know where 40 feet is a ways. And when I say that, you go out in your yard, I can spool my 8-weight. I can't quite, get there on a 5-weight, but on the 8-weight, I can certainly yard it out there. That's also set up for, it's the line I have is definitely set up for yarding out. But again, once you cast that out and then you look at where you went and then you imagine yourself on a river, you're casting across the river. The whole fucking thing. Like not on all rivers, obviously, but a lot of rivers, you're yarding it across most of the river, and you're missing like, well, I'm going to shut up and you can take it from here. But if you're casting into a pocket or a pool, if you have to cast that far to get to that pool, something has probably gone terribly wrong. And it took me a long time to realize that because I watched that damn movie and Brad Pitt looked awesome shadow casting. But go ahead.
Yeah. Oh man, it's like shadow casting is like Robin Hood splitting the arrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like, you know, this is where lengths of rods kind of come into play. So like if you're sitting in an inner tube on a lake, like typically if you're going out in the river, your thigh length are down. So, you know, you probably have, 4 feet of a human body outside the river. When you're sitting down in the river where like your hips are actually like in the inner tube. So your hips and up. So now you're like 2 feet above the water. That's where like actually going to like a 10 weight could help you because it creates more distance off the water, or excuse me, not a 10 weight, a 10-foot rod. Yeah, maybe now you're throwing a 10-5 or a 10-4. And so because all you're really trying to do at this point is you're trying to create kind of distance off the water. And because you're sitting low, that extra length is going to give you additional amount of mendability too. And that's kind of where lengths of rods kind of come into play. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't quite understand what you were saying as far as like trying to hit a pocket on the other side of the river.
Oh no, I was just talking about the distance and casting, and when I was merely mimicking me, I should add context that I was so engrossed in casting far when I first started fly fishing a long time ago that's all I worried about was just casting as far as human. It was like a badge of honor, and then you get out on the river. And it's like, okay.
And it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. I'm like, where the hell am I? That's what I was like. Where the hell am I going to need to cast 75 feet? Right. Like what went wrong for me to need to do that? And how the hell am I going to yard it on my back cast? I guess I missed some of the, I missed some of the fine print in here. You have to remember that the line is going somewhere, right? Most of the places I fish, you're not even able to, and this is both in high lakes as well. You can't even, you don't have the room behind you to allow that to happen. And that's where I was talking about on the float tube. And I did run a 10-foot. You don't have to worry about your back cast as much. But the reality is being accurate at a short distance and knowing how to read the water is far more important, much like hunting, than, the 100-yard shot or the whatever distance you want to talk about, distance of casting. Reading the water and knowing and being accurate is far more important than just yarding it out there. I should add more 100%. Context to that in the beginning. Sorry.
No, that totally makes sense. And hey, man, it's not like we don't take hero shots. We all have taken some hero shots. You know what I mean? But it's just like, if you want to be consistent, that just doesn't that's not part of the game plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. Dude, I hate to cut this off. I got to go to bed because we're hitting the river in the morning, and we've been on for like an
100%.
hour and 45 minutes. And I can tell I could talk to you for another 2 hours. So we should probably hit this again at some point as kind of things, transition, on with everything I've got going on question-wise, to kind of, throw things your way. I am excited. I think that might come this week. I had ordered that 9'5" Helios D. I'm kind of curious to test that against that 9'6" F, and see if I can, in my ability, tell the difference and what, like you said, that extra 5 inches. It doesn't seem like much. Well, I say that 5 inches makes a huge difference in some things. How much I'll be able to know that's the difference between that and a 6 weight or 9 foot 6 weight. Anyway, I'm excited to get that right. It is weird with everything that I watch that people sometimes poo-poo on higher end rods, and I don't know if I'm just I notice a difference. I mean, I noticed a big difference today. Now, I'm not saying that there's a massive difference between, I don't know, whatever, a $700 rod and a $1,200 rod, but certainly that $200 to $300 rod, there's a massive difference between that and the $8 to $1,200, $800 to $1,000 rod, it's night and day to me. Now it may be a lot closer, obviously, when you get, but do people poo-poo? I mean, I just said we should end this. Do people shit on the more expensive rods because you guys design the technology for provability as well, to show that the difference in accuracy and everything else in those rods? So is some of the things you see online where people are kind of shitting on the nicer rods, is that really common, and how much of that is a battle you guys deal with?
Man, you put something online and you're going to get every opinion under the sun, I mean, that's one thing I absolutely love about, Orvis and Scientific Anglers, is that the claims that we've made in our products, we've backed up with proof from a lab, So when we claim the most accurate rod, we have proof, and we can tell the story of how we assess that and why we make the claim. But that doesn't mean that, like, a shitty caster is going to, shitty caster is a shitty caster. You have to be at a particular level to receive the benefits of that rod, where it's like, I oftentimes refer to them as like, or compare them to like cars. Dude, you put me behind a Ferrari, I don't know what the F I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, I drive Toyota Tacoma or Tundras. I've had them forever. That's what I drive. And it gets me from point A to point B. And so you have to have a certain level to like receive the benefits of that higher octane thing. So if you're an accurate caster, you're going to be more accurate with the Helios. And that comes down to how the rod tracks. When it comes under load on the back cast, and when it rebounds from that coming forward, how straight does it track? And ours tracks significantly straighter than the competition. And so that's kind of the science behind that. And that's probably what I've heard most, coming specifically on the Helios. The other thing that you're getting is you're getting a lighter tip weight rod. And so it feels lighter on the tip. That's really easy to measure. And what that correlates to, I always say, is from 2 to 5 o'clock. Like if you go out, start fishing at 5, let's say you're on a guide trip. You get in the boat at 5, 9 o'clock, something like that. You start casting, you're excited, you got adrenaline, you're looking for this big fish, or you're just casting and casting and casting. Well, at the end of the day, you're flinging a rod and a string around, you're going to start to fatigue. And the heavier that rod feels at the tip, the more you have to put into the rod, casting it to load. Doesn't mean it necessarily may or may not have the best, same type of performance or capabilities. It just means that you're going to fatigue, man. And so I always say, like, after you have lunch and a sandwich and the sun is shining, are you going to stand back up and like start casting as effectively as you were at 9 o'clock in the morning? Probably not. So by having a lightweight rod, when you're casting, hundreds, if not 1,000 times a day, that's where tip weight comes into. So again, with our rod, not only is it the most accurate, it's also extremely light in the tip weight, where that creates to being more efficient and effective throughout a given period of time. And then the other aspect you get is durability. And this is kind of like, maybe kind of compared to kind of like with arrows. You know how they grade arrow shafts? It's kind of like that. When you get into a higher grade rod, there is more accuracy in the manufacturing of that rod. And that's one, going to help with accuracy, 2, going to help with weight. But it's also going to help with durability. If you have like a graphite blank that's more oval shape, it's going to have a tendency to want to like flex a particular way or compress in a particular way. Whereas the more spherical you can make that piece of graphite, like the more the natural structure of that sphere is going to create strength in the way that the rod bends. So you're gaining durability, you're gaining weight, and you're gaining accuracy as you go up in rods. But like I said this earlier in the conversation, I don't believe there's a bad rod. There's good rods, great rods, and exceptional rods. Every fly rod is capable of catching a fish. It's just how refined do you want to get in that process? And like I wouldn't say the average angler, but like the beginner intermediate angler, they aren't capable. It's like putting me in the Ferrari. They aren't capable of utilizing the benefits of that rod. When you start to get decent at casting, you're in that intermediate and advancing stage, that's where I think it's worth investing the money in the rod, because then you just have a rod that's going to last you longer, a rod that you're going to be able to fish more comfortably every day, and a rod that you're going to be more efficient in casting to your target time and time again.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. All right, dude, I got to go to bed. We're gonna hit the river again.
Actually, I'm joking because I get to hit the river for the first time tomorrow. So, first time this year. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, no, we did good today, and it was warmer, and it's supposed to be. It's gonna be a shit show Saturday and Sunday. So I'm trying to hit it today, knock out a ton of content videos Saturday and Sunday, and then hit it again Monday,
are we still
Tuesday,
recording?
Wednesday. Yeah.
Are we still doing the podcast? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
We got to figure out a time for you to come out here. You know, you live in a great area to fish too, but would love to have you come out here like late March, like early April. We have a really special hatch that happens here in Western Montana, and it's a really good chance to catch that big dog too. That we should discuss having you out here kind of late March, like early to mid April.
Yeah, no, I'm down with that. I'll get you my schedule with the different schools and everything else we're doing, and then definitely if you want to come down here ever, and fish, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I can't thank you enough. Before we hop off the podcast, I can't thank you enough for all the help on the fly fishing side of things, man. I'm stoked to get after it, and yeah, I appreciate it.
No, I love it, man. I really appreciate, first of all, meeting you and just being able to have these conversations, but second, for the ability to hop on here and have a conversation.
Yeah, no, it's been great, dude. Well, everybody, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm definitely a fan of Orvis. I was very excited to get that rod out today, and you guys have been great to work with as far as answering my questions, man. So everybody, thanks for tuning in, and yeah, dude, I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks a bunch. Appreciate it, everything, everybody.